There's a version of David's life where he takes the safe job in a small Ohio steel town and never ends up at CNN at all. He thinks about that version sometimes. But instead, at 21, he said yes to the thing that seemed impossible and spent the next 20 years covering the world, building a career that became his whole identity. Then, in his 60s, he said yes again, this time to something that seemed even stranger, packing up his life and moving to Alaska for a job nobody saw coming, in a place where a moose outside the window mattered more than an interview with the president. This is a conversation about what happens when you keep saying yes to the uncomfortable thing, about loneliness that quietly teaches you patience, and about the 2 words from his kids that set him free.
And then I got a cold call from another TV organization. I still, to this day, do not know why they called me. And they said, would you like to take a job running the only investigative news unit in the state of Alaska?
You're listening to the Life Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gilhooly. This show is built around one simple idea, that sometimes a single moment can change how we see everything. Each week, I talk with someone about the moment that shifted their life and how they learned to live differently after it. These are not stories about having it all figured out. They are stories about what it looks like to keep going once the story changes. Thank you for being here. Here's today's story. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Shift Podcast. I am here with David. Hello, David.
Hello. Good to be here.
Well, thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift Podcast. We've been trying to make this happen for a few weeks now, but family circumstances on my end, and you've been so generous on rescheduling a few times, actually. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm looking forward to this because it helped me think about the moments that were important in getting to where I am now.
Yeah, it has been a beautiful exercise that I've heard from a lot of my guests of we think about our life in different parts and how we've changed or made decisions, but sometimes challenging people to identify the most specific moment that we can leads to some uncovering of different things that we hadn't thought of before. So it has been a nice journey for me. When I started, I was like, oh yeah, it was when my mom died that everything changed when I was 8. And really it was hours later after my mom had already passed and my dad had to sit me down and tell me that my mom had died. And it was the words that came out of his mouth that changed my life and changed everything that I knew about my life. And so it has been a journey of healing, hearing all of these conversations, even though nobody has the same story, but there's something about the way we feel around certain things as humans that really has brought this connection that I didn't really expect having these conversations. So I'm excited to get into your story. But maybe before we do that, you can tell us who David is in 2026. How do you show up in the world? How do you identify these days?
The phrase I use now to describe myself is that I'm in the project-oriented phase of life. I do not wish to be thought of as retired. I just hit 68 years old, and the idea of retirement is just something that I can't stand, although I'm not going to an office anymore. I'm not out in the field producing news anymore on a daily basis, but I don't want to walk away from all those things that I've done for my whole life. I mean, I got into the journalism business in 4th grade when I convinced my 4th grade teacher that we needed a mimeographed monthly newsletter. If you remember, even mimeograph, those purple things it's an old technology.
That's before me, but I recall.
It's an old, silly technology. And no lie, from that moment on until now, I have been doing some form of journalism.
Wow. So you kept yourself busy. So it kind of probably makes sense why you don't want to just stop right now. Not that retirement is stopping. People find lots of things to do in retirement. So it's just the word for you, right?
Yeah, it's the thought that I don't have something to do when I get up in the morning. I'm an early person. I always have been. I studied early when I was in college. I didn't mind catching an early flight to go do a story somewhere, I mind that a little more now. And so when I was writing a book, which is what led to this conversation most directly, I would get up at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning and start writing, because that's when I have my thoughts most together. And that act of starting something early is what I want to keep doing.
Yeah. And you said you're project-based life now,
Right.
right?
I consult on other people's documentaries now, mostly.
Nice. I love that.
I'm
Just
glad
keep
I
yourself
don't
busy.
I'm glad I don't have to worry about the fundraising anymore. I just take a
Just tell
little
them what to
job
do.
here and there.
That's great. I mean, I think a lot of people can resonate with that idea of quote unquote retirement, because I think, at least for me growing up, retirement was seen as something like where it's the wind down period. It's the I'm super old and, like this is the end kind of, when it's not anymore, at least. I think when we're a kid, we think that people in their, 50s are old, which is not quite the case when you get closer to it or when you've passed it. So I can see that. I think a lot of people probably find new projects, whether that's hobbies, whether that's things that they can invest in to fulfill themselves. That's not necessarily quote unquote work. So I love that you're still like dabbling in the spaces that interest you.
It's got to be something. I mean, I remember I did a story once. I worked at, I'll just say this now, I worked at CNN, Cable News Network, for over 20 years. And a story that stuck with me, we did a story about people in retirement years who didn't retire. And we profiled an 80-year-old guy who worked at Stanford University as a groundskeeper, and he hit a mandatory retirement age. And he didn't want to stop working. And so they worked out a deal where he became a volunteer flower planter on campus. And he was thrilled. He wasn't getting paid anymore, but he could still get up every day and do the thing he loved. And it kept him going.
Right. And it keeps a purpose out there. It keeps we all need some kind of purpose to keep us going. So, keep doing what you're doing. I'd love to dive into your story. You gave a little bit of your background in journalism since fourth grade, but maybe you can kind of paint the picture of who you were before this main pivotal moment that we're going to center things around today, to give a good understanding of that backstory.
Yeah. So I got out of college and I went straight to this thing in Atlanta. And you talk about decisions. I sent out over 100 resumes. I graduated from journalism school at Northwestern University. So prestigious place, you would think jobs might be offered. And I had two real job offers. One was a very traditional job, small market television, Steubenville, Ohio. If you've ever heard of that, it is on the Ohio River. It was a steel town in deep decline, as many steel towns were. They wanted to put me on air as a general assignment reporter, very traditional path. The other was for this thing that didn't even exist yet. It was just starting up. And my dad, it was the only big fight I ever had with my dad. He thought it was crazy to go work for this guy he called a drunk, who happened to be Ted Turner, starting up this thing that no one thought could succeed, Cable News Network. And I thought, God, it sounds so interesting. It's different. It's challenge. And so I took that job, moved to Atlanta, and was there for over 20 years covering national politics. I did documentaries all around the world. I ended up an executive director of news planning, which made me kind of the network's news futurist, if that was the term I coined for myself, trying to figure out what trends and issues might be worth covering in the future. Not like something, plane crashes. You don't need someone to tell you what stories, how to cover that, but more thinky things, if I can say it that way. And then new ownership came in and I took a buyout because I realized
after
that it
20
was
years.
not going to be the same place. And I realized that they were going to, when a company comes in and wants to make cuts, they don't look to cut the low-priced employees. They looked to cut the high-priced employees. And I was a vice president, and I couldn't prove that my salary led to one more dollar in ad revenues. So I made the decision. Nobody asked me. I knew they were looking for people, and I knew I'd made the right decision because when I told my boss that I wanted to take the quite lucrative buyout they were offering, his answer wasn't, no, we don't want to lose you. It was, oh, okay. So, that tells you you've made the right choice right there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, although a big, hard choice, right? I would imagine maybe
very
if the
hard.
lucrative...
It was at that point, it was my whole adult life. It was my identity. It really was. Like when you work, people may have a hard time understanding this now because CNN has kind of fallen a little in people's minds, and it's now an old-fashioned technology if you think about it. Now it's podcasting, but for a good 20 or 30 years, it was the place to be. And so to leave that without another job did take some.
Plus, I would imagine you like grew up there. Like that is like all you knew in a way. Like that was you right out of college, right? So you're what, 20 something when you start this?
Yeah, I was 21. I got married. I had two kids. They'd been raised in that area. Coming home and telling your kids, guess what, kids? Dad quit his job. And they also, they at that point they weren't very old, but they understood, certainly my son was old enough to understand that CNN was kind of this important thing. So, walking away from something that is A, important, and B, everybody in the world thinks is important, that's a hard decision to make. But I just knew it was the time.
Yeah. Well, like because of the people coming in or the buyout, or it didn't feel right? Like, was it a gut feeling, or was it little things that added up that were like, oh, it's time for me to run?
Well, here's an infamous story.
Okay.
That was an internal thing, but I think it's been told in books since then. The new ownership came in and they had no experience in the news business. So CNN was not something they deeply cared about the way Ted Turner cared about it. They cared more about, TNT, the sports networks and the programming networks. But they said something in a meeting pretty early on that, again, if you listen carefully, it makes it not a hard decision. They had spent so much money that they had to show Wall Street very quickly that they had a handle on things. And they said, we are going to make our next quarter projections if we have to sell the furniture. So I didn't want to be in a job where they were going to sell my chair, and that is not literally, they were being figurative at that point, but they're also telling you what's important to them. And Ted Turner had always said, to his credit, Ted had a lot of quirks about him, but one thing he said, and he meant, he said, you guys worry about the news, I'll worry about the money. Can you imagine any executive saying that now? It would be, there's no CEO in the world that would say that anymore.
Right. Well, and it just shows the true like meaning of what CNN was and why it was successful. And I think I had something very similar. I worked in a for-profit private college, and I was in charge of the first semester for all undergraduate students. So the faculty and just numbers and stuff. And our semesters were 4 weeks long. So this is a whole other story. But there was a point in which admissions was reaching out to me saying, hey, we need to start students 1 week late. And I'm like, well, we only have 4 weeks. So you're not really setting them up for success. And it became quickly very clear that it was really all about the money. It wasn't about the education of the students, but here I am having to support the 100 employees and the education that we're trying to provide. And it was very much I was the dummy that said out loud in a meeting, do we care more about the money or the education? I knew the answer. We all knew the answer. I mean, they all walked around it, but it was important to me to vocalize that because in a very similar case, it's like what you're talking about. I'm doing this for the education portion, but if the people above me aren't, then what are we doing? Like, am I just wasting my time? So I can imagine what that feels like.
I tell people I came to CNN on the best day and I left on the best day. And what I mean by that is I loved my time there. I wouldn't change a single moment of it. The things I did, the friends I made, the places I went, things I learned. But when it's time to go, it's time to go. And one thing about me, and I know we're going to get to this, I'm really good. I like to pat myself on the back here, like analyzing a situation, making a decision, and doing it, not
Just
agonizing over it. I just don't want to agonize over decisions. And that's worked out for me.
Do you think that's part of just because of the industry you were in and the news that you were producing, that you kind of you didn't have the time to agonize over certain decisions?
100%. 100%.
Okay. So it's kind of ingrained in you in a way.
You live in a deadline-oriented world. If you fail to make your deadline, you have failed in your job for that day. And so you make your deadlines. And I looked at a lot of decisions that same way. Want to make a decision by the end of the week? I'm going to make a decision by the end of the week.
I mean, I love that. So you went in, you told your boss, I'd like the buyout. And he's like, all right, bye. And yes. So that's how it worked out?
Basically. That is how it worked out. And it gave me, because it was a nice buyout financially, because I was a vice president.
Right.
It gave me time then to set up a small production company in Atlanta. You have more than a year of health coverage and salary. You have a lot more freedom than most people.
Right.
And so I did that for a long time. And then I got offered a job unexpectedly in Washington, D.C., back in the real journalism world, doing investigative journalism for a syndicated news program. So I moved there 16, did that job for 6 years. And now we're going to get to the crux of the life shift I think that we want to talk about. Is it's another thing where I was doing investigative stories all around the country. I loved them. And then the owners of the show, the producers, one day said, politics are really hot in this country. Trump had become president. Let's do more politics. I had done my politics, and politics to me had become such a negative thing in terms of coverage. Like, I just didn't want to be a part of it. And so again, without another job, I just told my boss, that's it. I'm going to leave at the end of this year. I'll give you time to replace me. There was they wanted me to stay, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to replace me, which they did. I didn't want to leave like with a 2-week notice. I wasn't going to do that. But then I'm sitting at home and I'm helping other friends produce podcasts. And I was doing a music podcast with another friend. It was just fun. But as I say in my new novel, I said, you're not going to make a lot of money with 50 listeners per episode. It's just not going to happen. No sponsor cares about you. And then I got a cold call from another TV organization. I still, to this day, do not know why they called me. They said it. They just...
Or why you answered?
Yeah. They called and they said, would you like to take a job? So this is 2022. Would you like to take a job running the only investigative news unit in the state of Alaska?
Okay.
My reaction was exactly your reaction. I have no proof of this, but I believe that I laughed a little bit.
Yeah, it's not an unexpected call.
Unexpected, and it just seemed absurd for a lot of reasons. In terms of TV business, it's a tiny, tiny place. I thought they can't even pay me enough to pay for moving me up there.
Right.
And I don't know.
Because you were living in D.C. at the time?
I'm living in Washington, D.C. You couldn't be further within the United States from Alaska. I had no family there, no friends there. I'd only been there once before, working on a freelance travel piece. I was there for like 5 days, and that'd been years before. And I said, this is crazy. I'm not going to do it. And the recruiter said, well, would you talk to the news director? Now, how is this for a bizarre coincidence? I didn't know this, and the news director didn't know this until she gets a note to call me. It is an old colleague of mine from CNN who had moved to Alaska because she fell in love with the place. And she calls me up and she says, it's a fun job and you'll have freedom that you don't have anywhere else. And we'll fly you up here to see if you can stand it up here and you can meet the staff. So there I am with this offer.
Feels a little bit more real after talking to a friend?
More real, and because I trusted her, I knew that I wasn't being sold a line about the job or the freedom.
Right.
So then I call my kids, who are adults now. I have a son and a daughter, individually. And I said, what would you guys think if a month from now I took this job and I moved to Alaska? And both of them, to their credit, replied with a version of, that would be a pretty cool thing. Well, my kids said that to me. I'd talked to, and I talked to other people, but the power of my kids telling me that I wasn't crazy and that it sounded interesting and that they would look up to me if I made that, what I thought was a crazy decision initially. Yeah. That gave me a lot of freedom.
Yeah. So your kid's really the permission slip from your kid. Not that you needed that, but at the same time, maybe you did in your heart, you needed that.
Yeah, I think I did need a permission slip because even thinking back on it now, it's such a strange job offer. I had spent my life at the network or national level from the moment I got out of college. And even when I was in college producing radio shows, it was for the Chicago market, big market. And now I'm going to go work in local TV, which, remember, I had turned down 40 years before.
Right.
I had never worked
in a steel town, though.
In a steel town, and not in an icy town. And so that everything was going to be new. And the thing about it that would be newest to me is working with people who were, I want to be careful here, and I am careful in my book because it's important. Not people who didn't have the experience that I had in journalism, had not yet, in many cases, proven their talent in a way that people I had worked with had proven their talent, hadn't traveled as much, so didn't have the institutional memory or experience that I did. So I knew there was going to be a challenge that way. But I also thought, and this was another key part in the decision, that I would be able to mentor younger people. I've always found time to teach. I live in Colorado now, and I have been a guest lecturer and teacher on and off when I can at the University of Colorado School of Journalism. And I've dropped in on scores of other universities and high schools trying to encourage journalism and journalistic standards and all that kind of stuff. So the idea of mentoring people was appealing to me. And I said, yes. I'll do it. And they flew me up there and everything seemed interesting and cool. And I took the job and I moved up as soon as I could. I learned everything I learned. Moving to Alaska is a hard thing.
Where do you
want to know how you get your car to Alaska?
Yeah, tell me.
You could drive, but it would take weeks and weeks and weeks. So you hire a company and they put your car in Washington on the, like on a tractor trailer, and they drive it to Tacoma, Washington. Then they put it on a freighter. Whenever there happens to be a freighter carrying cars to Alaska, and the freighter takes it up to the port of Anchorage and it gets taken off as freight, and it takes weeks. But that's part of living in Alaska. Everything takes longer. Everything.
Yeah, it must have been such a shift just in daily life to go from DC to Alaska.
Everything, okay. Anchorage has a Walmart, it has a Buffalo Wild Wings, it has a Safeway. It's not another world.
You're not in like a snow castle that you built. Right.
But, however, everything is different. The culture is different. almost 20% of the people who live in the state of Alaska are indigenous people. They were never put on reservations in Alaska. It's a huge difference between the lower 48 and Alaska. So cultures were preserved, languages were preserved, land rights after some struggles were preserved. So there's a functioning, vibrant native culture that doesn't exist anywhere else in the United States. Then you have the weather. You don't see a roof for 5 months because they're just covered with snow. Some people are driven literally crazy by the length of the dark periods in the winter and the length of the days, sunny days in the summer. Nobody comes to visit you except for like the 3 or 4 months in the summer when it's nice. So, you are isolated. And the isolation and the loneliness, those were the two things that were most difficult for me. Positives were everywhere you look, it's a postcard. It's beautiful. The stories we did needed to be done, and we were the only ones who could do them. And in Alaska, people don't yell fake news at you. They still respect the work you do by and large. So it was important work. I felt it was important. You feel a real connection with the community and the state, which I never felt when I worked at CNN. It doesn't exist at the network level. If someone emails you, you don't take the time to respond necessarily because you're off on a plane to Paraguay. If you're working at Alaska's news source, which is what we called it because it was statewide collection of TV stations, you answer people, you answer the phone, you respond to them. That's important, and that's a connection that I never had in the news business before. It was fascinating and wonderful in a lot of ways.
Did you find it challenging to find stories? Was it because I think of CNN. I'm sure there was lots of things that you could easily report on, even if you were stretching a bit for that particular story. Was it more challenging in that way in Alaska?
No, it was the opposite because we were doing deep dive investigative things, not always, but usually. And so there are so many issues up there. Healthcare in Alaska Native villages, the lack of psychiatric care almost anywhere in the state. People are surprised when I tell them that there's a huge problem with homelessness in Alaska. Mm-hmm. So when you have, in the dead of winter, hundreds of people living outside in tents, often burning propane tanks inside their tents for heat, how a community, how a state deals with homelessness becomes a big, big story because people are literally dying. I'm not suggesting that people don't die as homeless people everywhere, but in Alaska, it's a special hell for people who are outside in 10, 20 below weather in the winter. So there were plenty of stories to do. Education is a constant. Funding education is a constant issue. So there were more than enough stories to do, and I could still be doing them.
Yeah. Did you feel a different sense of purpose because of that? Because it was so close to the community? Like I feel like maybe it would feel different.
I guess the connection with the community was something that I'd never felt, and that was important, and that does drive you to want to do important stories.
Right.
I had, they did a promo for me, a TV promo. Promos are only done for like the anchor people or the biggest reporters anywhere else. Nobody does a promo about the producer, but because I had some history and they believed there was some marketing value in saying, we've got this big national guy coming in here to do stuff. They did a promo where they shot me at my desk, pretending to type, and me out in the field. Okay, true story. And it's funny, I forgot about this story until just now. I was in a national park way out on the eastern part of Alaska, and it was just vacation. I wasn't working. And I'm just walking along this river where a bunch of people are salmon fishing or they have their tents up for hiking. There's 3 people around a fire. And one of them says, "Hey, you're the guy from Alaska's news source. And I looked at him and I went, how do you know that? He goes, we see your promos all the time. No one had ever recognized me in my life. And then he just wanted to talk in a very open, pleasant way about the news business and about personalities at the station. Everybody loves the weather people. So, is so-and-so a nice person, that kind of thing. But that connection is very rare for a TV news producer. It's unheard of.
Yeah, you really probably never, even at a big wig job in CNN, it feels like you could be just another number where you could actually.
People know. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
people know the talent, the on-air people. They do not know the behind-the-scenes people. Right. Do not.
Yeah, and even in the company itself, it's like you're one of probably a lot of people at CNN, and where probably, I'm assuming, this is bad of me, but assuming in Alaska your team is a little smaller.
Pardon.
Than CNN?
Yes, my team, my investigative team was a full-time videographer, editor, a full-time reporter, and then a second reporter who did part-time stuff. So yeah, to call it a team is a bit of, it's almost an exaggeration, but they were dedicated, and we did travel together, and we did a lot of stories together. So, it was a team. You were a team.
I asked about the purpose thing because I would imagine that there's a lot of people in the United States that don't often think about Alaska. It doesn't cross their mind very often. And I would imagine, this is just me. Go ahead.
Vice versa.
Oh, really?
That was a big bit of education for me. People in Alaska could care less about the lower 48.
Well, there goes that. Yeah. I mean, because part of me felt a little guilty that I don't think about Alaska enough.
Don't feel guilty.
But if I went there and then noticed, say it was the opposite, maybe they felt neglected, I would feel a different, like, oh, I got to get more news out here so that the rest of the country feels a connection to this state. But if they don't care, then there goes that.
Look, I'll tell you a story that I have to plug my book a little bit. I wrote a fictionalized account of my 2 years there. That's called 2 Years on Another Planet, because that was the way I felt like I was from another planet. And I thought, for sure, I'm in the break room, and I took this real story and I expanded on it. As with everything in the book, I fictionalized it and I made it bigger and hopefully funnier. I was in the break room with two camera people very early in my time there. And we were just talking about ourselves, introducing ourselves. And I sort of slipped in what I thought would be a humble brag that would get them to sort of pay attention to me as a person and respect me. And I told them that just before I had decided to take the job, one of my last jobs at the old place had been producing an interview with President Trump in the White House. They looked at me, it wasn't like they didn't care. They just didn't say anything. And then at that very moment, another employee came into the break room and said, "Hey, guys, there's a moose right outside the big plate glass window in the conference room." Oh, and everybody went, including me, to look at the moose, because we love to look at mooses in Alaska. They're everywhere, and they're huge, and they're magnificent. And it's interesting to watch them chew on a bush right outside your window. At no point that day or ever again did those two guys ever say to me, "Oh, finish that story about Donald Trump." It just didn't mean anything to them. The moose was much more interesting than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an anti-Trump thing. It was just, just don't care.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like in your industry would say that's a big get. That's a big
deal.
Right? Big deal.
Producing an interview at the White House is always a big deal. But not
when there's a moose outside.
Not when there's a moose outside.
This obviously you felt like another planet. What did it change in you, or what did you notice about you? Like, did you feel different? Did you acclimate? Like, what was your personal journey there?
The weather didn't bother me. The days, the night, that didn't bother me so much. The winter is long, and that bothered me a little. But the real thing that I had to deal with was my personal loneliness. Because Alaskans they like their privacy. You don't live in a place like Alaska if you want to be with 50,000 people at a UCLA football game. You live in Alaska because you like the isolation, you like your privacy. In fact, many people go there to get away from someone or something. That's kind of an ongoing joke is, what are you running from? Like, who did you kill or who,
Hopefully you didn't have that answer to that.
And I didn't. My answer was the job sounded interesting. But I did something I had never done before. I signed up for an online dating match thing. I don't even remember which one it was. And I thought, I've got to maybe just even if it's just one date, it'll be more interesting than another night at home. Never found a match. And I knew that I was in trouble when one of the matches that was made for me was someone who did not use a name, but her nom de guerre was, and I'm not lying about this, and I write about this in my book, exaggerate it greatly, but she wanted to be known as Arctic Muffin. And I don't, it's me. That just didn't sound like a match for me. I don't know. And another person in their bio said, I just don't like reading books. So it was just, these matches were not for me, and I never made a good match. So that was the ongoing struggle for me. Was you're in a place where depression, a lot of people suffer from, and it can be easy. Alaska has the highest rate of suicides, of spousal abuse, psychiatric issues. It's because of the isolation,
right?
Because of high rates of alcoholism and lack of proper medical and psychiatric care. And so just by the nature of being there, it's a place that can make that worse. So I never felt it in that regard, but I did feel a very powerful loneliness. And I had to, when I was writing the book, that was the thing I had to come around to feeling like I could write about that in an honest way, because it was an important part of my time there. And although it's fictional, I wanted people to understand that that's a real difficult challenge for people who come there without a family structure or a friend support group.
Well, even still, I mean, coming from just your industry in the locations you were in before, I would imagine that's a high contact, high interaction environment in which it's, I mean, even with a small team, it's a small team. It's not quite as
right. And
connected.
And there were always, because I went to a journalism school that puts a lot of journalism graduates in the world. I had friends in Washington who I didn't work with, who I'd gone to school with. And when I worked at CNN, it was just a giant friendship group. It was one of the best things about it. And then you go up there to Alaska and you got your two people in the unit, and maybe they're not going to be your best friends. And the newsroom is a fairly small newsroom. It's a challenge.
Yeah. And also, like, when your kids were growing up, I would imagine there's just activities with them and their family, or their friends' families, and all the things that come along with that. And to go to a place where you have to be prepared for something like that, and maybe.
Yeah, I don't want to say it was unexpected, because I did think about it.
Yeah.
But the depth of that isolation was unexpected. I just assumed, because every other newsroom I'd ever been in, at the end of the day, every once in a while, someone will say, hey, let's go get a beer. Or, what do you do? The Super Bowl is this weekend. I'm having a party. That just doesn't happen. 2 years there, no one ever invited me to a Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. Not out of meanness, but it's just not what is done. I had an anchor person on a Monday after Thanksgiving say to me, what did you do for Thanksgiving? And I said, I didn't do anything. I think I ate a frozen lasagna. And she said, "We thought about inviting you."
Oh, it's a thought that counts. That's what they always say, right?
How do you even answer that? Well, I didn't quite make the list of people good enough to be at your table. And
Yeah,
again, I want to say something here. She didn't say that out of meanness. She said it because it's just not the way people think up there.
right,
They have their family groups, and the idea of having a big Thanksgiving is just not what most people do.
right. So as you're navigating this, you come to realize, I would imagine, that maybe this is not the healthiest place for you to be? Or like, how did you decide that you're not there anymore now? So how did that come about?
Yeah, at the end of 2 years, and I had told them that I would make it 2 years. I
Okay.
didn't have like a guarantee contract kind of thing, but I told them I would do it. And as it got about a year and a half in, I just thought, I'm 66 years old. I don't, it didn't work out with Arctic Muffin.
Still time.
I might get back. I
Yeah.
might get back up there.
Never know.
It's just time. It's a good time to leave. It's time to get back to a place where I have a social group, where I have friends, and closer to my kids, and closer to things that matter to me. Why keep fighting it? But I do not regret it for a second. I got the book out of it, which I never, ever thought I had a fiction book in me. I'm a person who my whole life was about facts and data and what's
Right.
happening. And all of a sudden I had journaled extensively when I was up there. And I thought, this isn't a memoir. This is like a funny, fictional, somewhat serious thing I can write. And that got me up in the mornings again, even when I was there. And certainly after I moved, every morning, get up and write some of the book.
When you moved back, did you find it hard? Was there any difficulty in assimilating back into like the lower 48
No, I think it
culture?
was more. I think it was more difficult for everyone around me who eventually tired of hearing my Alaska stories.
And
I
then you're
could
like,
be,
I'll put it in a book for you.
yeah, I'll put it in a book. You can buy it. You can laugh at it. Like it was, I would be in a parking lot at the grocery store, and I would get into my car, which still had an Alaska license plate. And people would say, "Oh, are you from Alaska?" So it was a conversation starter for sure. You join the health club. "Oh, where are you moving from?" "I moved from Alaska." And everybody goes, "Alaska? That's a story." There's a story there. But then even I get tired of telling the same stories.
Yeah, I think I asked that because, when we as humans do something pretty regularly, we kind of get accustomed to the isolation, if you will, or we get used, like as a teenager, still struggling with grieving the loss of my mom, it was much easier for me to stay in a depressive state than it was to get into a different state. So part of that question is like, comes from the idea that maybe even though it wasn't ideal, you got used to it. That was the life that you were living, and whether or not it was difficult to now suddenly be invited to everyone's Thanksgiving, now you got to choose, or Super Bowl parties, or whatever it may be.
That's a really good point, and I'm thinking about it as you ask it, because I do think, looking back, that I'm sure there were months where I just convinced myself that, watching TV with a dinner in my hand, and going to bed at 6:30, especially in the winter, because it's already pitch black, midnight dark, that's normal. Yeah, I just do that. And it is normal in the sense that you normalize it, but it's not healthy. And that's what I think I had to come to realize, is that it's good I did it. I'm glad I did it, but it's not healthy to keep doing that.
Yeah. Did you bring any of this newness back with you? Like, do you feel like a different person now than before you went to Alaska?
I am so much more patient.
Okay.
So much more patient. I
Because
come
you were
from an
forced into
impatient.
it.
Yes, yes, yes. Another story, not in the book. When I moved into my apartment, the microwave didn't work So I tell the landlord, microwave doesn't work. Oh, okay, let me send someone out. Took 2 weeks to get someone out because it just does. Yeah, your microwave doesn't work. I'll have to order you a new one from the lower 48 because no one has that model in Alaska. And it took a month. Now, if here in Colorado, where you are in Florida, if you were at a landlord who took a week to get someone out and then told you to take a month to fix it, you'd be pretty mad. But in Alaska, you just accept it because you understand there is no other alternative. It's not like there are 100 suppliers with warehouses. You know, because my car went through it, stuff has to get on a freighter. There is no other way. Well, small things can be flown in, but anything of any size, it's got to get on a freighter, and it takes a while. So it made me more patient.
Yeah, in a good way. I guess that gives you the expectations that we as a lot of Americans have is this instant gratification because we live in the world of Amazon and we live in we have these easy, we can run to the store. I had a tiny bit of that when I lived for a year in Glenwood Springs, which is in the Aspen Valley. Sometimes we were stuck there because of a rock slide and there's only a certain amount of things you can do. And it was like your story of the microwave. It was very much like, oh, someone will be out to fix that. And then you're like, okay, when? And they're like, we'll let you know. It's a week later. And they let us know that they'll be there today.
There was no toilet paper in any Alaska, in any Anchorage store for a week because for whatever reason, the rack of toilet paper coming in on the freighter that week didn't get loaded. And so that's the sort of thing that upsets.
A shitty situation.
Exactly. But again, you just go, well, what am I going to do? They're still selling boxes of tissues, so that's the solution. Look, everybody in Alaska.
This conversation was going there.
People in Alaska, especially if you live outside of Anchorage, you become your own auto mechanic. You become your own plumber. You become your own electrician because you have to.
Resourceful, yeah. You have to. Yeah. No, I think we should all be, maybe not Alaska's a choice, but we should all make somewhat hasty decisions every once in a while. I don't want to say that for you, but I've done it before and we learn things, whether it's a great experience or a mediocre experience. There's something about doing something new that's totally uncomfortable that we can learn a lot about ourselves in what we don't like and what we do like. And it seems like you don't regret it, but you wouldn't choose to live there again, right?
No, I would not choose to live there again. And sometimes I do wonder whether I make decisions too quickly, but generally it's worked out for me.
That's all you can do. You can't go back and fix it. So let's move on, move on.
I know too many people who agonize over decisions and then they end up, whatever decision you make, it's a decision you've made. So why?
And it brings you to this point.
Yeah.
Right. So you said that you did a lot of journaling and of all your stories, but then realized maybe it was more of something funny, fictionalized. Why did you choose a fiction version of that? And curious.
At first, when I started journaling, and I was writing down things every day at the end of my day at work, including quotes that I could remember as closely as I could remember them, I thought maybe I'd do a memoir of my time there. But then I realized that I did not have it in me. I did not have it in me to be mean to people. And a memoir, if it's going to be of any value, you're certainly going to be mean to yourself at times, but you're going to have to tell stories about the people you work with that maybe don't put them in the best light. Maybe a mistake they made that led to something happening, or they weren't up to the job. And I just didn't have it in me. These people that I worked with cared so much about what they were doing. And I certainly didn't want to have people think, oh, here's the guy. He came in from the network. He came in from this big Washington experience and he laughed at us behind our backs and he made fun of us. And I thought, I still can tell the funny stories, but I make up people and they are collections of people I've known. So none of the characters are real people. There are stories that are almost everything is based on reality. The Thanksgiving story, the literal quote that I shared with you is in the book. Then it gets a little crazier in the book. So, but I don't hint in any way at who said that to me, because I didn't, that would be a good example. I don't want that person to feel like I was angry at them or making fun of them. And, in a memoir, that's always an issue of how many names do you use? How many bad stories do you tell? This also was more fun to take a chance and make stuff up, which I had never done, and which is the opposite of all my training. And I didn't think, I never thought I had a book in me, especially a fiction book, until the very day that I thought I had it in me. And it was another thing that just sort of looking at the journal, I went, I think I can write fiction about this. And then I just started organizing characters and plot. And I hired a developmental editor, which, helped me with things. And funny, in the first version she said, this feels a little too much like a memoir. And she was right, because the first couple of drafts were too close to true. So that set me off to make more exaggerations, hopefully make some stories funnier. But always it has at its core, my book has at its core a respect for the business and an explanation of why I think journalism is still important and necessary to people. Traditional journalism, not to take anything away from podcasts, which I love, but this conversation is different from doing a data dive into how taxpayer money is used.
Exactly. Yeah. I think there's certainly a place for so many different things. And I think now we have so many ways to get across. I mean, there are investigative journalism podcasts as well that share those things that you're mentioning. Like, a lot of the things I know about Alaska are because of some of these true crime podcasts about, places in Alaska and the crime and all the things that happened there. And so, yes.
One of the subplots in my book is, I'm sure something you've seen in these true crime podcasts or documentaries, is this ongoing tension between the Alaska Native community and the state police over whether missing or potentially murdered Indigenous, particularly women, those cases are investigated with the same energy that a crime against someone of a higher status in the city of Anchorage would be investigated. Part of the reality is, so if there's a murder out in one of these off-the-road Indigenous communities, the state police there's no police department in those towns. The state police have to get a plane and fly in, and the weather has to be good in these remote places. And so part of it is that it is much more difficult to even get an investigator to the scene of the crime. But it's also the lack of political power in the Alaska Native community at the time. By being so far away physically, they are far away psychically and mentally to the people who make decisions.
Well, and also just the community being more private as well. So it's probably a lot harder to get information from.
Huge issue. And that was a big part of my education was, I'm a white guy. So getting Alaska Natives to talk to me about healthcare or education in their communities, they are concerned that you don't have their best interests at heart.
Right. Or there's some kind of exploitation something.
Telling those stories is hard, very hard.
Yeah, for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, they shouldn't. It's an interesting story because, like I said before, there's so many people that don't think of Alaska very often. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know. It just is. And it's sad when you hear these particular stories because, they're Americans as well. And I don't know. Part of me feels
When I,
guilty now.
yeah, when I tell people that maybe 100,000 people total live in what are called off the road towns where there's no road that goes there. You fly in, maybe you take a boat if the weather's okay, maybe a snowmobile, which they call snow machines, and you get yelled at if you dare call them a snowmobile, that you get corrected. So you might have a nurse practitioner in your town with 2 beds, and she can prescribe extra strength Tylenol. So those are Americans. Those are American citizens paying taxes, and they have virtually no health care. Now, I don't know that there's a solution to that if your community is that isolated. It's not like you can build a hospital for a town of 500 people. But they are Americans.
Right. Yeah. I it's a hard, I don't think there's a way for me to reconcile my feelings right now about it all, but there is a guilt that feels more prevalent now that we've had this conversation. So thank you. No, I think it's important to have these conversations and realize like the life that we're living, even in America, is not necessarily going to be the same if we're somewhere else in the country, and we adjust, and that's fine. You can do that in the lower 48 as well, but it's quite different when you go somewhere like that and you created a story around it based on your own story. So I think people are going to have a fun journey learning about your story too.
I hope so. I want my story to be fun, and I also want it to be serious, and that's not always easy. I will leave it to readers to decide if I succeed, but
Yeah.
I feel a sense of accomplishment, and I feel like I did what I set out to do. And what more can I say than that?
I mean, you led this life of fast, 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 and then you made a decision that allowed you to slow down a little bit and see things maybe in a more calm manner and make decisions in that way. So now you get to live this life of knowing both. Do you ever think about that David making a decision between the almost CNN and the Ohio town?
I think about that all the time. There's a book, what is it? The Midnight Library, I think is the title of it. And the idea is that every one of us has a library of infinite books based on every decision we make. And I don't know whether my life would have been better or worse. I certainly wouldn't have met the mother of my children had I gone to Steubenville, but maybe I'd have been a CBS executive instead of a CNN executive, or maybe I'd have gotten so tired of being in a grimy town, sorry, Steubenville, that I would have left the business and gone to teach somewhere. Who knows? You can't know, but I do think about it a lot.
Are you glad you made the decision you did?
100%. 100%. My time at CNN was so amazing. I traveled the whole world. I covered presidential elections. I covered disasters. I covered happy stories. I covered everything, everywhere. And I made the most wonderful friends who I still talk to all the time. And we see each other because we all had that, especially those who came at the beginning. We had this crazy experience of trying to get this thing on the air when everybody thought it couldn't work. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of funny to think back on it when the joke was, you're going to do 24-hour news. You can't possibly fill it up. There's no way that you can fill 24 hours of news. And now, like 24 hours isn't enough. Now you need the unlimited space of the internet, mm-hmm. because there's never-ending stories. But yes. People really, in 1980, when we went on the air, people really questioned,
I bet.
Could you fill up the time?
To be fair, I don't know that they can fill up 24 hours these days. It feels like they repeat a lot.
I'm not saying fill it up with good stuff.
Yeah. Do you look at CNN now and see any elements of the CNN that you remember?
I do see certain elements because when something happens, when there's a natural disaster, a plane crash, a war, you still see bits of CNN's global reach with reporters, more reporters out there than anybody else. But it's become, it's certainly become more of a series of talk shows now than it was. Right. Not that we didn't have talk shows, but it's a lot cheaper to have so-called experts and pundits on retainer and bring them into a studio than it is to send someone like me with a crew and a reporter to Africa for a week. Right. And then you have to hire a fixer and you have to hire security. It's expensive. It's expensive.
Well, and even now, I mean, since the pandemic, when we all realized we could have our own studios in-house, you have all those pundits now that a lot of them don't even ever go to the studio to be a part of a regular part of a show. So there's a lot that's changed. Just curious if you see any remnants of the CNN you remember.
Remnants, and I still care about the place, and I still have some friends who work there. I was talking to a videographer who started just a couple of years after me, and he's been talking about retiring for 10 years now, but he can't walk away from the excitement. He's a bit of an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, which you probably understand.
Yeah, and you don't get that in many other jobs.
Yeah. Well, that's why you're project based these days, and you're finding ways to fill your time in ways.
I'm not an adrenaline junkie.
Okay, well that's
I
good.
Never was.
You're filling your cup in the ways that serve you, hopefully. If people listen to your story and want to read your book, or they want to tell you their stories, what's the best way to find you or get in your circle or be part of your world?
I have a website for the book called 2yearsbook.com, TWOYEARSBOOK.com. No spaces, just 2yearsbook.com. And there's a way to reach out to me there. And you can buy the book anywhere online books are sold. It's out there. I hope people will buy it. I have a Goodreads page where I encourage people to ask me questions about anything. I'm an open book. I spent my life asking hard questions of people. I'm one of those people. I had the original president, George Bush, kind of jokingly got mad at me and he had his staff, they dubbed me Son of Sam, the serial killer. And I was curious why they gave me that nickname just because I would yell hard questions. And it didn't even occur to me. Do you remember what the real name of Son of Sam was?
I don't.
He was David Berkowitz.
Oh.
And so they thought it was really funny. David Bernknopf, he's a serial killer in terms of the questions he yells at us. So I don't know. It wasn't all that funny to me, but now it's a story to tell.
Yeah. Well, I encourage people that are listening to these episodes, if they hear a part of their story or they feel like something you said resonated with them, even if it's not the meaty part of your story, if it's just something, I encourage them to reach out, because I know the power of sharing your story, personally sharing your story with someone, or how it connects to other people. So I encourage people to do that. So I'm glad to hear there's a contact form on your website. So
I look forward
highly
to it.
encourage it. Yeah,
I asked questions my whole life. I feel like I can answer them now.
Yeah, for sure. And the connection piece is so important. As you know, with your 2 years in Alaska, the connection is very important for a lot of people. And so I highly encourage people to check out your website, order your book, reach out to you, go on Goodreads and ask you some questions. I think all those areas, someone can do all or one of them, and make a.
And I thank you for this conversation, because it really did make just the preparation made me think about that moment. It really did. And I think we hit the nail on the head. My children gave me the permission slip.
Yep. And it's not that you necessarily needed that, but having that makes the decision so much easier for you to do and move forward with and be proud freeing. Of. Yeah. And that, yes, this might be crazy, but also this might be wonderful and something to try out. And it seems like it gave you a lot of things that you can carry forward. And so I appreciate you just being willing to have this conversation in whatever direction it happened to go today. Is just really grateful that you chose to do that.
I'm grateful you chose to have me.
Well, with that, I will not say thank you again, but I will. Thank you for being a part of this. I will be back next week with a brand new episode, but I really appreciate it, David. Thank you for listening to the Life Shift Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. There you can check out all the different episodes. You can check out the blog, some of the reviews for the podcast, and the Life Shift Journal. Links are there so you can purchase your own copy, whether in digital or print format. Thanks again.